Could one foreign ally's tanks shift the balance of a war already stretched to its limits? On October 17, 2025, the horizon over Donetsk exploded with the sound of steel and thunder. Satellite feeds captured hundreds of North Korean Type 2 Emperor 13 main battle tanks and artillery units arriving from Russia's eastern reserves, a development confirmed later by Reuters and DW. This was not rumor or propaganda. Pyongyang had committed hardware and personnel to support Moscow's exhausted southern front. For Ukraine, it was a moment of both danger and opportunity. From the east, 300mm rocket salvos streaked across the Dusk, Iskander-type missiles, arcing into Ukrainian lines. The noise was deafening like continuous thunder over the steppe. Yet from the west, Ukraine's reply came not in chaos, but in synchronization. HIMARS and M270 launchers rose from their dug-in positions, locking onto coordinates with accuracy refined by NATO satellite data. French Caesar self-propelled howitzers fired in rhythm their 155mm shells, striking fuel depots and command nodes with surgical precision. According to a defense news report, U.S. intelligence had warned days earlier that North Korea's export detachment included around 260 armored vehicles and mobile rocket systems transported through Russia's Far East rail corridor. Their arrival was meant to reinvigorate a campaign stalled by months of Ukrainian precision warfare. But it also created a logistical strain. Russia had to divert fuel convoys from Siberian refineries, weakening domestic supply. That diversion cost Moscow an estimated $180 million in lost production within a week, an impact later highlighted by The Guardian's energy desk. Above the front line, Ukrainian F-16s recently integrated into service with NATO guidance, circled at 450 miles per hour, scanning for incoming helicopters. American military analysts noted how this marked a transition from defense to deterrence. Ukraine's air wings now operated with real-time coordination from NATO's airborne early warning systems stationed over Poland and Romania. The battlefield had become a global chessboard, and every move was being watched from Washington, where President Donald Trump faced mounting pressure to define how far U.S. support should extend. By 5:15 p.m., the Donetsk-Luhansk frontier detonated into full engagement. Dozens of 300mm rockets streaked through the darkening sky, carving arcs of orange light. Each impact cratered the soil, setting off ammunition caches and sending tremors that local seismographs measured as equivalent to a 3.2 magnitude quake. Al Jazeera correspondents near Kramatorsk reported the ground shaking for nearly a minute. Villagers miles away watched the sky glow red as oil depots burned. The North Korean units pressed forward 50 tanks at the tip of the spear, rolling west through smoke and flame. Their engines roared at 200 horsepower treads, tearing through the black soil. But behind tree lines and hills, French observers and Ukrainian gunners watched silently. They had pre-sighted coordinates confirmed by reconnaissance drones orbiting at 12,000 feet. The order from Joint Command was clear hold until the entire armored column entered the corridor. Why did Kyiv choose patience over panic in such a moment? Could the delay itself become the weapon? As shells rained and engines thundered, the defenders waited, calculating. The trap was set, but the world did not yet know it. What kind of commander stares at a wall of advancing steel and still whispers, "Wait"? As dusk deepened over Donetsk, the joint Ukrainian-French command center remained eerily calm. Reports from reconnaissance drones painted a terrifying picture. More than 200 North Korean tanks and armored vehicles were now inside the 20-mile approach corridor west of the Donetsk-Luhansk line. Yet no order to fire had been given. French advisors monitoring radar feeds noted the column's density. It was precisely what the defenders needed. Every vehicle that entered that narrow zone would soon be trapped under overlapping fields of fire. The plan, a NATO-style kill-box strategy first tested in Iraq and Syria, required discipline and silence. As Defense News later described it, the greatest weapon that night wasn't artillery, it was timing. Ukrainian field commanders communicated only in bursts of coded signals. Electronic warfare units jammed North Korean VHF frequencies, cutting them off from Russian coordination. By holding their fire, Ukraine forced the enemy to advance deeper, compressing their own formation. Military Watch magazine analysts compared the tactic to the Allied ambushes at the Battle of the Bulge, patience weaponized into annihilation. In the nearby town of Sloviansk, civilians took shelter as the sky flashed. Yet inside Ukrainian forward bases, a strange stillness ruled. 12 French Caesar self-propelled howitzers stood motionless, their crews watching monitors as the coordinates converged. HIMARS and M270 launchers had preloaded 136 precision-guided rockets, each with GPS accuracy within 2 meters. NATO's role, though officially non-combat, was unmistakable. Satellite data relayed from European Space Agency assets fed directly into the Ukrainian command grid. American reconnaissance planes orbiting over the Black Sea transmitted radar signatures of the North Korean units. From Washington, intelligence briefings flowed hourly to President Donald Trump's Security Council, where officials debated whether to authorize another shipment of ATACMS missiles. BBC News reported later that this 90-minute window of restraint tested not only Ukrainian nerves, but the limits of modern joint warfare. Could democratic armies fight with machine-like precision without losing their human instinct to act? The French officers present many veterans of Mali and the Sahel believed they could. The hardest order, one said anonymously to Le Monde, is not to shoot. Then came a tremor, literally. A mine-clearing charge detonated prematurely, setting off a buried ammunition stock. The explosion threw a wall of fire hundreds of feet into the air and flattened a nearby grove. Seismic monitors recorded a magnitude 3.2 tremor, and observers feared the illusion of calm was over. But the Ukrainian command still held back. General Syrskyi, overseeing operations from Kramatorsk, reportedly quoted a line from a NATO training manual: "Let the noise deceive them. Let their movement betray them." That philosophy defined the moment. The advancing column, blind and confident, continued to roll forward into the pre-sighted coordinates. By 5:30 p.m., the first 60 tanks had crossed the ridge. Forward observers radioed the confirmation code, 3 words that triggered every firing battery to ready status. French and Ukrainian artillerymen exchanged one last glance. In 15 seconds, the step would change forever. Would the patience pay off? Or had they waited too long, the answer would come with fire. Can a single minute decide the fate of hundreds of armored vehicles? At precisely 5:31 p.m., the Ukrainian-French fire plan came alive. 12 Caesar self-propelled howitzers fired in perfect unison, their shells slicing through the dusk. Each 155mm round carried nearly 21 kilograms of high explosive striking at preset intervals to land within seconds of one another. Simultaneously, M142 HIMARS and M270 launchers released their guided rockets in staggered volleys. From afar, it looked like an orchestra of fire. The first explosions tore through the center of the North Korean armored column. Dozens of tanks vanished in a storm of dust and heat. Secondary detonations followed as fuel convoys ignited. Shockwaves flattened roadside trees, and fragments of reactive armor flew hundreds of meters. DW later reported that sensors captured temperature spikes exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius, an inferno that turned the Earth into molten glass. It was the most concentrated precision barrage of the war so far, said a senior Western defense analyst interviewed by Reuters. French forward observers adjusted their coordinates in real time, guided by drones orbiting at 12,000 feet. Every correction refined the strike further. Each minute brought another layer of devastation. Within 10 minutes, an estimated 30% of the leading armored force had been destroyed or disabled. Electronic warfare specialists then intensified jamming across the VHF spectrum, severing the enemy's ability to coordinate a counter-barrage. The sudden silence on enemy channels created panic. Russian field radios designed for short-range communication failed to reconnect, leaving isolated crews stranded in the open. What had begun as a confident, mechanized push now devolved into chaos. According to Military Watch magazine, the Caesar's fire control algorithms developed under NATO's Strike Integration 2024 initiative allowed shells to land in overlapping shock zones. This technique, long tested by France in Africa, was now proving its worth against massed armor. Analysts later noted that such accuracy would have been impossible without continuous intelligence sharing between France, the United States, and Ukraine. At 5:45 p.m., the second wave of precision fires began. HIMARS units switched to cluster configurations targeting retreat routes and ammunition haulers. The effect was catastrophic. Fuel trucks exploded, sending fireballs hundreds of feet into the air. The shock waves shattered windows in villages nearly 5 kilometers away. BBC correspondents described columns of flame visible from across the region, while the Kyiv Independent called it a textbook case of modern networked warfare. North Korean infantry attempted to scatter, but they found no refuge. Drone footage captured their formations, breaking apart, moving between burning wrecks as Ukrainian shells tracked their movements. The sky pulsed red with every impact. Inside the joint command post, the French and Ukrainian officers watched without celebration. Each blast was another proof that the strategy had worked, but also a reminder of the immense human cost. And yet above the smoke, something else was unfolding. Ukrainian F-16s guided by NATO's AWACS radar systems from Polish airspace were descending toward the battlefield. Their mission was to close the trap, entirely cut off the air cover that might have saved the retreating tanks. Would air power finish what artillery had begun, or would Russian interceptors arrive in time to turn the tide? How does a battle shift from control to catastrophe in the span of minutes at 5:50 p.m.? As the inferno over Donetsk reached its height, the Ukrainian Air Force entered the fight. F-16s operating under NATO-linked radar guidance dived through smoke columns, their targeting systems locking onto infrared signatures of North Korean helicopters hovering along the front. In seconds, air-to-air missiles streaked towards 7 enemy rotorcraft, each carrying surveillance and targeting payloads crucial to the ground advance. All 7 were hit within 40 seconds. The loss blinded the assault's command structure, and according to BBC analysts, transformed the battlefield into an uncoordinated storm of burning steel. Below, Ukrainian special operations teams emerged from concealment. Moving through tree lines with javelin launchers and French MMP systems, they hunted for surviving tanks. The first wave of top-attack missiles struck engines and turret rings, piercing armor designed to withstand direct frontal hits. The explosions rolled through the steppe, echoing for miles. Reuters later confirmed that over 20 T-90 and Type 214 tanks were destroyed within half an hour. Meanwhile, chaos spread among the attackers. Electronic warfare units from Ukraine's 47th Brigade jammed short-range communications, while French EW specialists disrupted Russian command links across the Luhansk relay grid. It was digital suffocation, said a NATO defense official to The Guardian. Crews unable to receive new coordinates began firing blindly or abandoning vehicles altogether. Without air or satellite correction, their counter-battery strikes landed harmlessly in open fields. High above, American reconnaissance aircraft monitored everything. CNN reported that the Pentagon's Joint Surveillance and Target Attack Radar System, JSTARS, provided live battlefield updates to NATO's control center in Ramstein, Germany. Although Washington maintained its stance of non-deployment, Trump's administration quietly approved expanded intelligence sharing that week, reflecting how far NATO's support network now extended behind the scenes. By 6:05 p.m., the front had turned into a graveyard of armor. Flames reached 30 meters into the air, their light visible as far as Mariupol. Ukrainian drones dropped thermobaric charges onto stalled convoys, igniting remaining fuel. The heat warped steel and scorched the surrounding farmland, a reminder that even victory could devastate the soil beneath it. DW estimated the economic loss of destroyed equipment at nearly $1.4 billion, a figure larger than North Korea's entire annual arms export revenue. Still, no one inside the command posts celebrated. French medics prepared for incoming casualties, both friendly and enemy. The radio chatter carried no triumph, only precision. For Ukrainian commanders, the goal was not revenge, but dismantling an offensive that threatened to open the southern front. Then, amid the burning wreckage, a new radar contact appeared, fast-moving, high-altitude, inbound from the east. Russian MiG-31s were entering the battle space. Air superiority, which Ukraine had briefly seized, was about to be tested again. Would this sudden escalation draw NATO deeper into the skies over Donetsk? Or would Kyiv stand alone under the next wave of Russian missiles? Could this be the moment when an entire offensive collapses under its own weight? As the sun sank behind the Donetsk horizon, Ukrainian radar stations picked up the incoming MiG-31's fast, lethal, and carrying R-37 air-to-air missiles. Yet to the astonishment of onlookers, they never reached their intended engagement zone. NATO's airborne early warning aircraft from Romanian airspace relayed tracking data to Ukrainian F-16s in real time, allowing them to reposition before the Russian jets could lock on. Within minutes, the MiGs broke formation and turned east, avoiding a direct confrontation. The airspace fell silent once again, and the initiative returned fully to Kyiv. At 6:20 p.m., the last coordinated salvo from Ukraine's HIMARS batteries struck the remaining transport vehicles retreating east of Luhansk. The timing was impeccable. Fuel convoys, logistics trucks, and mobile repair stations erupted in synchronized explosions. According to Defense News, the joint strike effectively dismantled 3 entire armored battalions before they could regroup. Military experts later estimated the loss at over $700 million in equipment and supplies, a devastating blow to Moscow's effort to sustain its imported North Korean hardware. French advisors described the engagement as a masterclass in battlefield geometry. Every strike had a purpose: to cut arteries rather than limbs, paralyze rather than pursue. The tactic echoed NATO doctrines used during Operation Allied Force in the late 1990s, destroying logistics first to collapse offensive capability. Ukraine didn't just repel an assault, said retired U.S. General David Petraeus on CNN. They redefined modern defense under fire-fusing NATO intelligence with homegrown resilience. Back in Kyiv, President Zelensky briefed reporters beside General Syrskyi, emphasizing that France's partnership had been critical. At the same moment in Washington, President Donald Trump addressed a divided Congress. He praised Ukraine's defensive success, but urged Europe to carry more of the financial load. His words drew mixed reactions, yet behind closed doors, Pentagon officials authorized additional radar and satellite resources under the Mutual Security Support Program. A subtle nod that U.S. involvement was deepening, whether declared or not. By nightfall, reconnaissance drones showed hundreds of burning wrecks littering the corridor between Donetsk and Luhansk. The glow of molten steel reflected off the clouds like a false sunrise. Local civilians filmed the spectacle, uploading footage that soon dominated social media feeds worldwide. Economists at DW later calculated that Russia and North Korea had lost the equivalent of 4 months' production from their combined armored factories. The domino effect was immediate fuel consumption across the Russian southern military district, spiked, forcing temporary halts at several oil export terminals along the Black Sea. Amid the destruction, Ukraine's success carried a sobering truth. The same precision that saved thousands of defenders had also scorched farmlands and ruptured irrigation lines. Environmental monitors estimated the cleanup cost at over $40 million, a silent reminder that even defensive victories carry collateral wounds. Still, the moral and strategic momentum had shifted irreversibly. The Donetsk-Luhansk front, once considered lost, was now stable. NATO analysts quietly celebrated for the first time in months Russia's offensive momentum had not merely stalled, it had imploded. But beneath the triumph loomed a new question whispered across European capitals. If Pyongyang could send tanks, what might Beijing send next? What remains after the smoke clears victory, or just the memory of survival? By dawn on October 18, 2025, the battlefield east of Donetsk had fallen silent except for the soft hiss of cooling metal. Ukrainian recovery teams in radiation suits moved carefully through the wreckage, marking unexploded ordnance and extinguishing fuel fires that still burned like small suns in the mud. Thermal sensors recorded ground temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Celsius, in some craters proof of the intensity of the prior night's bombardment. Reuters and Al Jazeera correspondents arriving hours later described a scene beyond conventional war. Entire fields were charred tanks, half melted into the soil, and the air hung heavy with the smell of diesel and ozone. Yet amid the devastation, medics from both the Ukrainian and French units worked side by side. They treated not only their own, but also captured North Korean soldiers, many suffering from burns and shrapnel wounds. DW later noted that this display of discipline and restraint became a rare moment of shared humanity inside an industrial-scale battlefield. Official after-action reports released by Kyiv showed that over half of the attacking armored force had been neutralized, more than 130 vehicles destroyed or abandoned. Russia's defense ministry remained silent, but satellite imagery analyzed by the BBC confirmed the scale of losses. The failed offensive also triggered an unexpected crisis back in Moscow. With so much imported hardware lost, new contracts with North Korea were temporarily frozen pending an investigation. Economists estimated the setback would cost the Kremlin nearly $3 billion USD in replacement value and delay future offensives by months. French President Emmanuel Macron publicly praised the coordination as a testament to Allied precision, while Donald Trump, facing mounting questions in Washington about America's long-term commitment, called the engagement a model of self-defense done right. Still, both leaders hinted that diplomacy must follow destruction. European think tanks like the IISS warned that continued escalation risked drawing Beijing into open support for Moscow, a possibility that could reshape the strategic map of Eurasia. For Ukraine, the victory was bittersweet. Villages west of the front remained without power, and farmlands were uninhabitable from fuel contamination. The government's emergency budget allocated $90 million for environmental cleanup, yet that figure could rise sharply once spring planting begins. "We stopped their tanks," said one Ukrainian engineer to The Guardian, "but our soil paid the price." Still, morale surged. The cooperation between Ukrainian and French forces, supported quietly by NATO intelligence, proved that a smaller nation, equipped with precision and patience, could defeat massed armor. It became a case study taught across Western military academies within days. More importantly, it reminded the world that unity in adversity remains the most potent weapon. As the morning light spread over the blackened steppe, the last drone of the night circled overhead, its camera panning across wrecks and rescue crews alike. What stories would this footage tell the world? The triumph of strategy, or the tragedy of endless